On today's show, we're talking prospects. I'll break down what the Mets' top 10 is heading into the 2026 season.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're listening to Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. This episode of Locked On Mets is brought to you by MLB The Show 26. Visit MLBThe.show/Locked On and use the code Locked On to unlock a pack for use in Diamond Dynasty, available now on PlayStation 5, Xbox, and Nintendo Switch. Rated E for everyone, and stay tuned for later in the episode for our MLB Top 100 highlight. Now we're going to go through the top 10 prospects in the Mets system on today's show, and I'm also going to discuss, instead of bold predictions, I thought it would be better to talk about what would be a real developmental goal for each of these prospects, or is a question that they need to answer this season. So we're going to start at the top of the Mets farm system, and there's no surprise who the number one prospect in the Mets system is right now. That's Nolan McLean. Nolan McLean was unbelievable down the stretch last year. He has looked good so far in spring. Obviously, the World Baseball Classic, he did not have the big victory in the final where the whole team put him on their shoulders, and Nolan McLean was this hero for Team USA, but he also did not pitch as bad as I think the public perception might have been, because Team USA didn't win those games that he started. But he still went through some really tough lineups and did a nice job in his two WBC starts. And I think that learning experience is going to carry over for him, and he's going to be just fine. I really think that Nolan McLean is set up to have a very nice season. And when you're trying to talk about goals for Nolan McLean or things he needs to work on, there's really not that much that needs to be ironed out in Nolan McLean's game. The one thing is just command. He can be even better with his command. His stuff is so nasty that it hasn't really hurt him, and it's not like his command is going to lead to a ton of walks, but it's just he can be even more refined with his command and can pitch deeper into games, but also he can, really get to the point where if that command is dialed with how good his stuff is, that's where he gets to the point where we are talking about one of the very best pitchers in Major League Baseball. So if there's anything to work on, it's command. But to me, the only goal for Nolan McLean, 30 starts. If Nolan McLean makes 30 starts in a Mets uniform this year, this team is going to be really solid. So that's the only goal I got there. I don't have any bold predictions or anything that, I want to put on these guys. We talked about McLean on the bold prediction show for the whole team, and I talked about his ability to lead the team in wins and ERA and potentially even strikeouts. All to me that the Mets should hope for this year is a completely healthy season for Nolan McLean. I think the rest will handle its stuff. It will handle itself. That's how good he is. Now, the number two prospect in the Mets system, again, no surprises. The guy that was, I think, the player of the game yesterday. And for those of you who didn't catch it, I did a post-game stream right after opening day. And the final segment, I broke down some of my key takeaways. And I did name a player of the game. I named Brett Batty because his hit was the biggest in the game. It was the one that, got the Mets the lead and turned the momentum in that game. But I think in retrospect, one of the comments that we had on the show was, why isn't Carson Benge the player of the game? And I think that commenter was right. Carson Benge was the player of the game on opening day, from hitting the home run to drawing multiple walks, to stealing a base, to looking solid in the outfield. Carson Benge, I think, is looking very comfortable early on in his big league tenure with one game under his belt, but he looked comfortable all spring. And I would say for him, this year is just about holding his own in big league at bats, particularly against left-handed pitching. And we saw him draw that big walk against the lefty that opened up that one rally yesterday. So I think just proving that he can hit lefties and be an everyday player is really the main thing for me on Carson Benge this season as far as a goal and something that you want to see him sort of prove. It's just that. Prove that there's no reason for Tyrone Taylor to be taking starts from you against left-handed pitching, and getting on base and just grinding out at bats. That's going to be the thing that will just keep Carson Benge in the lineup, is the fact that even if the results aren't always there and going up against big league pitchers with big league scouting reports, he starts to have some struggles and maybe can't put up the same type of numbers that he would put up in the minor leagues. As long as he is giving you a good at bat and he's providing what he can in the outfield and right, you'll take it. So that's really all that Carson Benge needs to prove this year. It's just that he can have consistent, solid at-bats at the MLB level and prove that he can hit lefties so he can be an everyday player. The number 3 prospect in the Mets system for me has been Jonah Tong. But AJ Ewing was so good this spring. I'm flipping those two guys. I think AJ Ewing is the best prospect that is starting this season in the minor leagues for the New York Mets. He looked so good and so competitive in those at-bats against some big league pitching throughout spring training. And there is so much to like when you're thinking about a profile of a guy who can be your starting center fielder and potentially be a very good, if not elite, defensive center fielder if everything breaks right. His ability to get on base and cause havoc on the bases once he's there is really exciting. I think the things to look for this year that he has to work on, for one, the ability to hit breaking balls is definitely something that needs to be worked on. And I think the more and more that he rises through the system and goes through AA now, and he'll start the year there, but after a couple months maybe gets the call up to AAA, then you're facing pitchers who have more to their arsenal. And also, I've talked about this in the past. The difference between AA and AAA is in AA, you talent-wise might be seeing better arms. Those are arms that I think for the most part are going to pitch to their strengths. When you get to AAA, you start to see guys who have been in the big leagues. And I just feel like the ability to execute a scouting report on specific hitters just goes up a notch once you get to the more advanced level. And so having pitchers, if they identify that AJ Ewing's biggest weakness is sliders, they're going to spam him with sliders until he proves he can hit those pitches. So just his ability to hit breaking balls is a big thing that I'm going to be watching this year. And then also turning his plus EVs, which is his exit velocities, into in-game power. Can AJ Ewing hit more doubles? Can he hit more triples? Can he actually hit some home runs this year? That is the difference maker between him being a solid prospect that has a 4th outfielder floor with a chance to be more, to a guy that can be the starting center fielder for the New York Mets for years to come. So we'll see how he does in those departments. The reason why I have Ewing over Jonah Tong, it's not a knock on Jonah Tong. It's just, if you're looking at the next 7 years and you're trying to figure out who is going to bring more value to the New York Mets, when you look at a WAR perspective, right? Wins above replacement. The everyday player, the potential everyday center fielder, is going to be more valuable than a middle of the rotation starter. And so I just look at where AJ Ewing could go, what he's proven, and what he looked like in spring. And I'm going to sort of bake in what I think is going to be another sort of semi-breakout season for AJ Ewing, where he's going to build off of the breakout last year and keep on moving that needle forward, where I just like the ceiling there, but I also like the floor. If he's just a good defensive center fielder who can steal a bunch of bases when he gets on, that alone is going to be really valuable. The fact that he might be able to be a really plus hitter that can hit for extra bases more and be this spark plug atop your lineup, that just has me even more optimistic and excited to see what he's going to do. So AJ Ewing at number 3 in the Met system. Jonah Tong is at number 4. And with Tong, the biggest thing is just, is that cutter a pitch for him? And can he find a 3 or a 4 pitch mix that works as a starting pitcher, that he can have enough weapons that when something's not working, he has counters and other things that he can lean on and can he get to a point where it's not just fastball changeup? That's the biggest thing for Jonah Tong. I think having a full season here in Syracuse, not to say that he won't come up and make some starts at certain points, and not to say that by the second half he's not a fixture of the Mets rotation. I think just going into this year where it's just another year of development for Jonah Tong, where he can work on his pitches and figure out what arsenal works best for him. To me, he's in a really good spot with the expectations that have been put on his shoulder, where he is not expected to be a huge part of this rotation. He could be, but the expectation's not there. And I think that should give him the peace of mind going to the season. He just has to focus on, as he'll say a lot, where his feet are. And they're in Syracuse right now. And he's got a lot of things that he can work on to develop himself into an even better pitcher. So that is the top 4 prospects in the Mets system. I think they really are in a tier of their own right now. You get to the next grouping, you have other guys who are already on top 100 prospect list or could get there soon. So we'll talk about the middle of my top 10 here in just a minute. This week's MLB Top 100 highlight is brought to you by MLB The Show 26, the latest from the beloved video game franchise. Each week, we're going to highlight the stars of MLB's top 100 players, the elite names you'll be controlling, building around, and going head-to-head with in MLB The Show. And today, we are spotlighting Bo Bichette, number 44 in MLB's top 100. It's been a lot of fun for me to get to hit with this new-look Mets lineup from Francisco Lindor and Juan Soto, who were at the top of the Mets lineup last year. But now you get a chance to play with the Bo Bichette and take at bats with him. Have him play some third base. It's been fun to see what that looks like. I haven't had any issues. We'll see if he has any issues when this season really gets rolling. But it's been a lot of fun to play with Bo Bichette, and that is this week's MLB Top 100 highlight presented by MLB The Show 26, where you can play, manage, and build with your favorite players and teams. If you love talking baseball, you're going to love playing it even more. Visit MLB.show/LockedOn and use the code LOCKEDON to lock a pack for use in Diamond Dynasty. Internet connection required. Available now on PlayStation 5, Xbox Series S and X, and Nintendo Switch. Rated E for everyone. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. The tournament is here. One of the best times of the year. Brackets, buzzer beaters, upsets. It's nonstop action from tip to final cutdown. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers a way to stay in the action all tournament long. And here's the best part. You get up to $300 in bonus bets back every day for 10 days. That means 10 chances to stay involved throughout the entire tournament. You can mix it up however you like, whether it's game picks, futures, even the same game parlay for a bigger potential payout. It's the perfect time for the tournament right now because every single day there's something new, different matchups, new storylines, and more ways to get involved as the bracket unfolds. So visit FanDuel.com to sign up today. That's FanDuel.com to get in on the action. If you're watching on YouTube today, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Help us get closer to our next goal of 16,000 subscribers. I wanted to get there by opening day. We came up a little bit short, but we are not that far away, about 70 more subscribers to get there. So I do appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. All right, we're at number 5 on my top 10 prospect list for the New York Mets. I think this is another one that is a little bit obvious to me. And that is Jack Wenninger, who is right there with the top tier of this farm system. I think the difference is when you're looking at the top 4 prospects in the Met system, in my eyes, it's 4 guys who are like top 50 talents in the game, where you have, of course, Nolan McLean is the best pitcher prospect in baseball going into this season. Carson Benge is a top 15 to 20 prospect in baseball going into this season. Jonah Tong has been sitting on top 100s for some time now and is, depending on your outlet that you check with, somewhere in the top 50 or not far beyond that. And AJ Ewing is rising up these top prospect lists as well. I think he will be a consensus top 50 prospect in baseball before long. Jack Wenninger is more in the back half or back end of our top 100 for just baseball.com. I believe he was in the 80s, somewhere along that range. So he is already considered a top 100 prospect by our outlet. And I think there's going to be other outlets that also start to add him to the top 100. Really good pitching prospect. We'll see. I thought he was going to start the year in AAA. Right now, he's not listed on the Syracuse Mets roster. He's listed on the Binghamton roster. So I do wonder if he's going to open up the year in Binghamton after a full year there last year. Doesn't really make sense to me for him to do that because he proved all he needed to in AA and he looked good in big league camp. So I think he ends up in Syracuse. But regardless, Jack Wenninger just has to continue to stay healthy and build on what he's been doing because he is getting to a point where this guy appears to be a very high probability big league starter and a guy that can eat up innings for you at the back end of a rotation. My sort of question for Jack Wenninger is just, can he continue to sit 95 plus with his fastball? Because that's been one of the big things is he is averaging 95, 96 miles per hour on his fastball at times compared to when it was sitting at 92, 93 back in 2024. So the added velo helped him have a great season last year. I just think if he can stay in that range with the devastating splitter that he has, I think he's going to get outs. I really do. If he continues to throw at 95 plus, I don't think that there's much question he's going to be a big league arm and one that should be able to turn over and line up multiple times. So Jack Wenninger, number 5 on my list of the Mets top 10 prospects. Number 6, it was Ryan Clifford. And spoiler alert, Ryan Clifford's going to be there next. I'm going with Elian Peña. Elian Peña looks so good in that spring breakout game. He batted .292 last year in the Dominican Summer League with a .421 on base and a .528 slug. So his OPS was .949. He hit 9 home runs as a teenager in 55 games there. He's going to be in the Florida Complex League this season, I would imagine. I think he'll stay stateside and play there for a good amount of time before he eventually earns a promotion to St. Lucie. If he does this year, we'll see. But he's still just 18 years old. Last year was his age 17 season. So we'll see. We'll see what this year looks like. If there are some growing pains, it would be expected for a teenager who's playing in America for the first time and living in America for the first time for there to be some struggles. I think that would be totally fair, but he's going to impress more than he's not, I think. And the things I'd be looking for with Elian Peña, for one, can he show that he has the chops to stick at shortstop? That's going to be something to monitor as Elian Peña continues his career here. It's just, is he able to be a big league caliber shortstop? It's not to say the Mets will need him there in a couple of years with Francisco Lindor locked up, but you never know. And as far as just prospect status, if he can prove that he can be a big league shortstop, that's just going to make him that much more valuable when it comes to how he ranks amongst other top prospects and just how the Mets will value him long term. So can he show that he can stick at second is a big one. And also, will the power continue to translate and show up? Because at his age, the more that he continues to fill out, and he already has, he looked like a man, not an 18-year-old boy in that spring breakout. I mean, he looked like a real athlete who was kind of ready to go and a guy that can really do damage to the baseball. If he can continue with those physical traits and getting the most out of his frame, and that power really continues to translate, that's where you're talking about a guy that's going to be a no doubt top 100 prospect in baseball and one that will shoot pretty high on top 100 prospect lists. There's just a lot to like with Elian Peña. So that's my number 6 prospect in the Mets system. I already revealed number 7. That's Ryan Clifford. Ryan Clifford going to spend this year in AAA. I think the big thing that I'm looking out for with Clifford is passive does not equal good plate discipline. Yes, drawing your walks, being patient in the box, those are good traits. But there are times where Ryan Clifford could do more damage if he was more aggressive in zone. So knowing when it's time to let it eat and get your A swing off and try to swing for the fences, when you need to shorten up, when is the time to take some pitches and get deeper into counts, whatever it is. He just needs to work on his overall plate discipline. And again, I think the aggression is an important distinction. Jeez, I am just knocking my mic, changing things up. Anyway, yeah, that's the big thing for me. It's just passive does not equal good plate discipline. Will he be more aggressive in zone? If he is, that's really going to help his profile. And also, it's just going to be interesting to see how much run he continues to get in the outfield and how much the Mets think that that's going to be something that they can rely on once he eventually gets to the big leagues. Is he a guy that can go and play left and first? That's going to hedge a lot of the defensive turns. That is defensive. I think I somehow combined defensive and concerns in one word, but that's going to really quell a lot of the defensive concerns on his profile. If he has multiple positions he can buy time at, first base is probably the long-term home for him. But again, if he could play some outfield too, that would be helpful for the Mets and their roster building. The last guy I wanted to talk about in this segment is number 8 in my top 10. That's Jacob Reimer. And I wanted to include him in the same segment with Ryan Clifford because they're very similar prospects right now. Clifford bats lefty, Reimer bats righty, but they're both players that are predicated on their power, sluggers, and they're both dealing with defensive limitations right now. With Clifford, it's just a matter of, okay, is he just a first baseman or can he play first and the outfield? For Reimer, it's can he stick at third base? I think that's actually my biggest question for Reimer this year, and the biggest goal is to prove that he can. Because if Jacob Reimer is a first baseman, not as valuable of a prospect, but if he could prove that he can be a big league starting third baseman for a team, that's going to make him so much more valuable to the Mets or any other team that might choose to trade Jacob Reimer to. But I look at Ryan Clifford and Jacob Reimer, and I'm just more excited about the home run pop of Ryan Clifford, a guy that could hit 30 home runs in a season. Not that Reimer can't, but I think Reimer is more going to be 20 to 25 homers with a ton of doubles. I think it's more, spraying the baseball all over the field, line drives everywhere. Ryan Clifford, yes, he can do some of that, but it's getting into that pop and putting the ball into the seats. So that is 1 through 8 in the Mets system. And I really think that, again, there's different tiers to this. That top tier of McLean, Benge, Ewing, Tong, really tough to be part of that tier, but Jack Wenninger is close. But you have in that other grouping of Wenninger, Peña, Clifford, and Reimer, guys that all could finish this season as consensus top 100 prospects. And when Benge and McLean graduate, which for McLean is no time, for Benge, it'll happen once he, gets a couple weeks under his belt this season. Everybody else goes up a notch, and all of a sudden, Jack Wenninger, Elian Peña, Ryan Clifford, Jacob Reimer, they're all right there as far as being top 5 prospects in the Mets system, or a little bit stretched out beyond that because you still have Jonah Tong and Ewing. So that should be your top 6, right? Very soon. And it's still a good top 6 for a system that is pretty loaded. What we're going to talk about in the final segment is a couple more prospects that rounded out my top 10 and an honorable mention of the guy that was very close to breaking the top 10. So we're going to go through that to close things out here in just a minute. What if sports were traded like markets? Now you can put your sports IQ to work in real time with Robinhood prediction markets. It's not you against the house, it's you participating in a live market where you can buy or sell your positions live all game long. Use your sports knowledge in the moments that matter. Robinhood predictions markets change the game. It's people moving the action, so when the momentum shifts, you can move with it. I always knew the game, but I never had a dynamic way where I could apply that knowledge. Now I actually can take part live in a market that's powered by people. You're no longer just a spectator. Play by play, you decide. Trade every play with Robinhood. Now available across the U.S. Download the Robinhood app now to begin. Futures and cleared swaps trading involves significant risk and is not appropriate for everyone. Events contracts are offered by Robinhood Derivatives, LLC, a registered future commission merchant and swap firm. Today's episode is also brought to you by Indeed. Workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, an inbox that's overflowing, and the one position you have to fill is sitting there open. When the pressure's on and you need the right hire, this is a job for sponsored jobs. Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for, skills, experience, location, so you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute I've been talking to you, there's been 27 hires made on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Less stress, less time, more results. We need the right person to cut through the chaos. This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. And listeners of the show will get $75 in sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. It's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need a hire? This is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen or your first watch every day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. You already live your team every day. Now it's time to take it up a level and go ad-free. Join the Everydayer Club and use the promo code MARCH this month. A couple days left. You will get your first month of the Everydayer Club for free with that promo code MARCH. If you want to be part of our Discord to chat with the Mets fans, if you want access to a merch shop, or you just want to get Locked On Mets without the ads, make sure you go to lockedonmets.supercast.com and use that promo code MARCH. All right, 2 more prospects to round out the Mets top 10. At number 9, I got Jonathan Santucci. Jonathan Santucci had a rough start last year in Brooklyn, figured it out, and was unbelievable. This is a guy who can throw in the upper 90s with his fastball, and he is left-handed, and his slider is his best pitch, a devastating breaker. Between that fastball-slider combo, you can already envision a lockdown reliever late in games. You can already see that. But if he develops a third pitch and can turn lineups over, you might have a really good starting pitcher on your hands. And that's what, to me, is the big goal of this season for Jonathan Santucci. It's just, can he work on, ideally, that changeup to just give him something else, something that's going to break in a different direction than his slider, something that he could change speeds with compared to his fastball. So we'll see what the arsenal looks like for Jonathan Santucci, but the stuff is great. I think the other thing would just be throwing strikes more, but Jonathan Santucci is a name to watch and one that I think could really pop this season. Another guy who I could see conceivably being a top 100 prospect in baseball before it is all said and done this season. Number 10 on my list of the top 10 prospects in the Mets system, I got Chris Suero. I love Chris Suero. I love the fact that he catches and he plays the outfield, he plays first base, and his pop is really fun. He hit 21 home runs across 130 games in the calendar year that was 2025. Five of those home runs came in 15 games played in the Arizona Fall League. But prior to that, he still was, coming off a great season last year. High A, put up really big numbers. Double A, a little bit more of some growing pains, but still held his own, got on base at a good clip. I think the 2 things that I'd be looking at for Chris Suero in this time as he, continues to further his development and get to the upper levels of the minor leagues, it's, can he continue to get on base at a high clip? Again, last year, 379 on base between high A and double A. So can he continue to get on base at a high clip? And how much power does he tap into? Is this a guy that has consistently 25 plus home run power, or is that just a matter of circumstances? Also, can he continue to improve as a receiver? Because if he really can be a big league caliber defensive catcher, and then he also brings all these other components to the table, it's just a guy that is a lot of fun to watch, and one that maybe I gave a tiebreaker to between our number 10 and number 11 prospect in the system of just, okay, I like the idea of Chris Suero more than the idea of Nick Morabito. So I'm going to go that route and pick Chris Suero to be part of the top 10 and leave Morabito off of this. And the reason why I wanted to still talk about Morabito today is because I think he really does belong in this grouping of players where, yes, you could bump Jonathan Santucci and just have Nick Morabito be a top 10 prospect in the Mets system. There are guys that you could always drop off or drop lower, like Elian Peña. Some people might not have him even in their top 10 prospects in the Mets system because they want to see it done in real games, and then they will adjust, the perception of the player. I think with Nick Morabito, he is going into this season off of a solid campaign and a good enough one where the Mets had to protect him from the Rule 5 draft. but I still want to see more from Nick Morabito. I still think we're looking at a fourth outfielder in the long run, but he's still young enough that he can totally prove me wrong, and he might be better than that. He might be a guy that should be a starting center fielder for a team. He's only 22 years old, so there is a lot that you should like about Nick Morabito. As a fan, he just is a fun player, a guy that's going to be able to create some havoc on the base pass himself. Last year, even though it wasn't a lot, he still did improve his extra base total, hit 27 doubles compared to the year prior where he had 17. He had 2 triples this year compared to 5 the previous year, but all in 2024, he had, 26 extra base hits. He just out doubled that this past season. Also hit 6 home runs. So it was good to see him getting into a little more pop. And I'll be curious what it looks like when he plays a full season at Syracuse. The big question for me is just, can he continue to hit for high average? We've seen the average drop as he continues to go up levels, which makes sense for a guy that has so much speed, where some of those infield hits are now outs. You have better fielders that can make those plays. But you look at the batting average for Nick Morabito, 273 last season. Year prior, he batted 312 and was the Mets minor league player of the year. Can he stay at 273? If so, he got on base at a 348 clip last year in Binghamton. I think that's fine. If he's getting on base somewhere in the mid 300s, if it is I'd say 35 to 360 on base percentage, anything in that range in AAA, I'd sign up for it. I would take it in a heartbeat. And Nick Morabito is the type of player where obviously he can still draw walks. Don't get it twisted. It's not like he has bad plate discipline and that's not his game. But his game is predicated on his ability to put the ball in play and make things happen, and just his contact skills. So I'll be curious to see, what does he hit in AAA? Is he a 280 hitter? If so, all right, the Mets got himself a player. Or now that he reaches the highest level of the farm system, do we see the batting average drop off to 250, 240? If so, he doesn't hit for enough power to sort of compensate for the lack of hits that he might get, right? He doesn't have other areas where his offensive game can provide value. For him, it really is get on base and use that speed. And so we'll see what this year looks like for Nick Morabito in AAA. I wanted to include him, though, as our number 11 prospect in the system, because it's not like Chris Suero is drastically better. It's pretty much more just picking your flavor of the month. And for me, that was Chris Suero, but another time it certainly could have been Nick Morabito. And I think once you get beyond the top 11, then you start to really think about guys that have a lot of upside, but may not the longest track record. It's tougher once you get beyond 11. So I think Nick Morabito deserved to be in this grouping on today's show. That's going to be all, though, for this edition of Locked On Mets. Tomorrow, I will be doing more prospect stuff. We're going to look at the prospects who didn't make my top 10, guys that you really want to watch this season, potential breakout candidates. That should be a very fun show. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network.